Hey, everybody, you all know who I am. Let me introduce to you Ottawa-born Mike Gormley, who has achieved the pinnacle in recognition as a journalist, record company executive, artist manager, music supervisor for TV and films, and as a marketing and PR expert in his 40 plus years in the music industry. For my 467,000 subscribers, Mike truly is a giant in the music industry, and we should all be grateful for the time he's about to spend with us. This will be a once in a lifetime learning experience, so perk up your ears. Hey, Mike, I'm not going to stick strictly to chronological order, so I'm sure you'll be able to think fast on your feet. But the first thing I want to ask you is your motto is activity breeds activity. And it may sound simple, but many people just don't understand this axiom. Could you talk to me a little bit about it?
Sure, and thanks for having me on, and hi to everybody out there. It's an honor to be here. Uh, Activity breeds activity. You're right, it's simple. It really is what it says. If you don't keep busy, nothing's going to happen. If you do nothing, nothing's going to happen. But if you're active, sometimes it may not even be in your field, whatever you're dealing with. If you're active, something will happen. Something will come together. I've first few jobs I got were merely because I had other jobs, and I achieved some things, and people came to me because of that. So that's what it is. I'm surprised at how many people sort of say, why isn't anything happening, or what can I do, and so on. You just got to be active at maybe hopefully what you enjoy doing.
Got it. Well, let's jump a little bit into your history, and I'm going to start at the ripe old age of 18 years old when you were already a weekly columnist and writer for the Ottawa Journal, where you covered pop music stars of the day, such as the 60s icons, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, the Everly Brothers, and many more. From your base outside of San Francisco, where you were attending college. Uh, I know this, but please remind me where you attended college and what degree or degrees did you attain?
Um, I never really finished college, to tell you the truth.
Me neither.
Um, I was studying journalism, and I started writing, which I'll explain in a sec. And I was getting published, so I thought, why, if I'm getting published, why study journalism? So I studied psychology instead, thinking that would be helpful in just doing interviews, dealing with people, which it was. Um, but the way I got going is sort of activity breeds activity situation. I went to a concert in San Francisco on the Cow Palace, and I don't remember everybody was on it, but I think it was Sonny and Cher, and I know the Bo Brummels, and a lot of great 60s artists. And it was huge, and there was a huge orchestra in back with two drummers, and it was being conducted by Phil Spector.
Wow.
And I just wrote something about it and sent it to my hometown morning paper, because there was a fellow there named Sandy Gardner who was one of the leaders, you might say, in music reporting for newspapers. They gave him a page every week, and it was a big morning newspaper. It wasn't like it was a big deal for him to get that. So anyway, I just sent it to him. Didn't know him. I just did. I
So
wrote kind of a review.
activity breeds activity.
Yeah, well, yeah, I wrote that. If I hadn't written that, I don't know what else might have happened, because that's what got me going. And then they said, "Can you do another one?" And I said, "Sure." What it would be is, they'd be coming into San Francisco to do the Fillmore, and there was a little place over in San Leandro. Uh, it's called, oh, I can't think of the name of it now, but it was during the week. It was a roller rink, and on Fridays and Saturday nights they brought in bands, but they brought in the Everly Brothers and the Association and Love and some, it's
Let
really
me let me let me stop you real quick. My cousin is Barry DeVorzon. Have you ever heard of him?
sure.
Well, he under his record label had the association. So
Uh,
so there's our 7 degrees of separation right there. So
sure
continue.
did.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Anyway, in those days, there wasn't the kind of security that's going on backstage now. I literally walked up to the dressing room, knocked on the door, and said, "Hi, I'm Mike Gormley from the Ottawa Journal. I'd like to sit and do an interview." And they always said yes. They probably had no idea what the Ottawa Journal was, because they were all California guys or whatever the case might be, but they weren't attuned to what was going on up north that much. The Everly Brothers probably knew it because they'd been there several times. Uh, anyway, they just let me in, and I would start asking them questions, and I tried to ask them, somewhat intelligent questions for an 18-year-old. Not the usual things, and so it worked out well. Buffalo Springfield. I heard on a radio interview. I didn't realize that they were mostly Canadian, and but I heard the accent, and so I got hold of them through the management and set up the interview. And I went in and hung out with them at their hotel, and that's the first time I met Neil Young, and it was. That sort of thing. I would jump around. I didn't have like a real schedule, but then later on they hit me with a weekly column, so I had to make sure I got hold of some interviews because it was going on each week. It had a
So
picture of
were you responsible for finding the people you wanted to interview and getting it scheduled and meet them wherever they were?
yeah, absolutely. It was just me.
Wow.
I was learning about PR guys and management and I tell you the truth, I don't remember how I found the Buffalo Springfield management, but I did somewhere along the line, maybe on the back of an album cover for all I know. But I got hold of them, and it was the band was so good. It was and the fact they're Canadian, and I'm writing for a Canadian newspaper, really gelled nicely.
Um, how were you so directed in journalism just out of high school when most people don't even know their favorite color by then?
Um, well, my father was a journalist, but in his early years, but he was a really fine writer, and he actually wrote for kind of as a stringer for Variety magazine for 25, 27 years. Um, and I studied, of course, in school, but I didn't pay attention much in school. I just somehow knew how to do it. I just somehow knew to put all the stuff together, and basically I can still do it. It's a natural thing, or observing. I'm not sure, but I just wrote the story, not knowing really what I was doing, and sent it in. And when they wanted more, I had to pay attention. But I just started writing. What happened?
Mm. Um, you also wrote, excuse my dog. You also wrote for Playboy, Cream, Billboard, Chicago Sun-Times, and others on a freelance basis. So you
Yeah.
must have had a gift for writing to be so successful on a freelance basis.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I ended up at the Detroit Free Press, the morning newspaper there. I think it was like the fifth largest morning newspaper in North America, and they actually hired me as a I think they said teen reporter. I've forgotten what they called it. And I had a column, and
A
I had
youth
a
youth editor.
youth editor. That's right. Um, and that was great. It was mostly music, but not all music. I talked to people about other things. And because of that position in a pretty major newspaper, people were contacting me, and uh, it 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 just it just kept flowing. It just kept going on. It's still kind of going on. I've probably written 1,000 bios over the years as a PR guy. I just keep doing it. It just keeps going.
All right. Um, Something I found pretty interesting in your history is after being in San Francisco for a while, you returned. Let me get the dogs out of the room.
Okay.
So I thought they would leave me alone. Good riddance, animals.
Mhm.
Uh, all
Just wants
right.
some loving.
They want they want their snack for the night. They've already
Oh, I
eaten.
see. Okay.
So you returned to Ottawa for a short time to write for Canada's prime minister at the time, or was this before he was a prime minister? Because I know he's been in office for, or was in office from 2015 to 2025.
Oh, that's his son who's just been in office for the past 10 years. The
Ah,
original Pierre Trudeau was a magnificent, uh, just a magnificent man, and and that was in the late 60s, early 70s, and he stayed in power, I think, for also about 10 years, and then he got voted out, and then he got voted back in a few years later. He's an iconic figure in Canada. He died some time ago, but and he was there was actually a thing called Trudeau mania, and it was because he was relatively young. I don't know. I mean, 40s, I guess, or something. I did pay attention to that, but he literally had some people chasing him down the street and like he was a rock star, and he was very forward, but he also was very very intelligent, very free guy, and you could just sit down and talk with him. What happened was I was in Ottawa waiting to get my green card to come to the States. And I went into some restaurant one night and there were these guys from the Toronto Globe and Mail, which is kind of the New York Times of Canada. And I asked what they were doing in town, and they were working for Pierre Trudeau. They were writing for him. He wasn't prime minister yet. It was when he was running for prime minister the first time. And they said, "Well, why don't you write with us while you're waiting around?" And it was excellent. It was kind of like a newsletter every day. But it came out like a newspaper. Um, and it led to my sitting in a dining room at the prime minister's house with Pierre Trudeau, just chatting. I have a habit, sometimes a bad habit, of showing up to parties like right on time, which, showing up late is the thing to do. I would show up right on time. I showed up at that dinner right on time, which was a big party he was going to have. And he was the only one there. So I got to sit and talk with the Prime Minister of Canada for, I don't know, about 20 minutes. And he was great. Excellent guy.
nice man, huh?
Yeah, I liked him, and like a politician, some people didn't like him. Some people to this day don't like him because he was, especially in Quebec, which is where he was from. The whole separatist movement was going where Quebec wanted to break away from Canada. Pierre was fighting that, so there's still some people don't like the fact he did that, but he did. I mean, made it work.
Literally kept Canada together.
He did, yes.
Okay. When in your incredible history was this particular stop? About what? How old were you?
I guess by now I was about 21,
Okay.
something like that.
Um, let's move a little bit into the music industry now. Unless you got more stories to share,
No,
uh,
I just as an afternote, I was also going to school to Algonquin College in Ottawa, so I did graduate from there, but it was more a certificate than a diploma. I was studying marketing for some reason, but it was handy. And but yeah, that's what I did. That's when I went to Detroit. And my first story that I printed in the Detroit Free Press was an exclusive interview with Neil Young, who at that time Buffalo Springfield had broken up, and he was doing a solo tour of small folk clubs around North America. And it was a small club in Ottawa called Le Hibou, French for the owl. It was been around for a long time, and some really great names had come through there. I went over in the afternoon and sat with him for a couple hours and few hours and just talked over things because Buffalo Springfield were gone. But that's when he told me about what he was going to do with his bands coming up and that sort of thing. So it was
such as
um, what the heck? What's the name of this? Is stupid. I forgot the name of the band that he then.
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
No,
Uh,
but before that,
before that,
he had his. I've forgotten the name. That's
you
crazy,
know,
but
I have too, so don't feel bad
okay.
because I know
Anyway,
him.
it was kind of legendary band that, and then he left, and then he brought them back together again, and his song "Needle in a Damage Done" was about a fellow in that band who OD'd. So it was important to him.
Um, you have been responsible for setting into motion many artists' international careers, and a little advice on the music business. First of all, back then, what was the main secret or ingredient to building a true international following and career? And if you want to jump forward, you know, a decade or a couple, uh, how has it changed? And we're going to be hitting on this again towards the end of the interview. So if you don't want to jump ahead, that's fine. But
I don't mind. It was the music industry was in its Wild West stage. It was pretty loose. A PR guy, head of publicity for Mercury Records, flew into Detroit, and I thought he was just coming in to talk to me about Rod Stewart, who was on that label and not yet broken through, and a couple of other artists. And instead, he was offering me his job.
wow.
Really hadn't done PR at that point, so it was kind of strange. I had people working for me who knew more about it than I did, but I said yes because it was, of course, more money, and the headquarters were in Chicago at that time, so I liked that idea. So off I went to, uh, I sat in my office, which was a huge office, and two secretaries, and I wondered what to do,
What do I do next?
Yeah, and out my window of the office was the Playboy building, and I just thought they had they had a circulation of like 7 million at the time. They called a pass on 27 million. I thought I better get to know these guys, and I did. I called them up out of the blue. They said, "We're having a picnic this Saturday. Why don't you come around to the picnic?" And I said, "Great." And I was thinking these were going to be guys that you would see in Playboy. They were Hugh Hefner guys. When I got there, were a bunch of hippies, and I connected with them quite nicely. So they did a story on Rod Stewart, which later on I found out was the first big story on Rod or something like that. Oh, no, no. They're basically a jazz magazine, and they interviewed Rod, and that was one of the first rock artists they talked to.
Okay. Um, After being invited to join Mercury Records, which is what we're talking about right now, uh, you were the director of publicity.
Mhm.
And as you just said, you really had no idea what the position entailed. But you engineered media campaigns for Thin Lizzy, Rod Stewart, the New York Dolls, and we're crossing a lot of genres already.
Mhm.
Rush, which happens to be my sound guy's favorite band. He's from Canada as well.
Cool.
Bachman Turner Overdrive, the Runaways, the Ohio Players, and many others. Um, uh, what what period did this cover exactly?
The 80s, I'm sorry, the 70s, up to, I was in Chicago up until 1978, and then that's when I came out to California with A&M Records. So I was there about 8 years. I loved Chicago, didn't want to leave, but there wasn't anything there for me anymore because the label was moving to New York, and I didn't want to do that. They actually wanted me to go to Germany because they were owned by a Dutch company and a German company.
Polygram.
Yeah, and they wanted me to go to Germany and work with the main guy over there. And
And you did eventually go to Hamburg for a little while, didn't you?
well, no, I just went looking for an apartment. I went there getting ready to move over. I had, meetings and so on. And
Because
then,
you had a second offer at the same time, right?
yeah, they wanted the main guy wanted to move to New York. He thought he should be in New York, and so that meant I would go to New York. Right around that time, I got a call from A&M Records saying you want to move to California, and I said, "Yeah, I do." You know, there was the other situation was getting a little entangled in politics and so on. So off I went to A&M, and that incredible home of incredible music. It was an amazing experience to just be there for a few years. And while I was there, uh, this this trio from England called the Police were signed, sent us their first record, which was Roxanne, which right away sold me on them, and Supertramp, a lot of other bands like that. But A&M was really a family, and it still is. The funny thing about it is the A&M ended in the early 90s. It's taken over by Universal. There was a reunion about a year and a half ago because Jerry Moss, the M of A&M, passed away. People came in from all over, Japan, England, New York, and of course here in LA for this great evening. It was the first time most of us had been back on the A&M lot for many, many years. It was magic. So that element of A&M still, and it's on Facebook. You get A&M people writing back and forth, and it's the way it was. It was just truly a family feel to it.
The A stands for Alpert, right?
Yeah, Herb Alpert.
Yeah.
I got
Okay.
it. Age 91, he's out touring.
Wow.
And he reformed the Tijuana
Gi
Brass.
gives me hope.
Yeah,
I'll be 91 in 20 years, so I'm closing in fast.
yeah,
Um,
well, it'll be all right. We just keep going, keep the activity going.
Activity breeds activity. And
Yeah.
I'm going to drill this into my subscribers' heads uh, through this interview and through my tutorials that I do every week. Um, uh, you brought to the world such successful artists as film composer Danny Elfman. And I must tell you, as an aside, I was an Oingo Boingo freak in the 80s and the early 90s.
Really
And
good for
I
you.
saw Danny and his brother Richard at the Troubadour, must have been early 70s, uh, when they were the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo.
Right, right. You saw there was street theater, really. You saw that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I never got to see that. I was living in Chicago then, but they were on IRS records, and then they were on A&M records, and that's how I got to know them. Um, Danny is a brilliant musician, um, a, a front man for a band like you've never seen, and the band was incredible. Very, 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 let's say, educated musicians. Um, and But they sure had the word quirky was always used when it came to the band. And I was trying, they would sell out huge venues on the West Coast, San Francisco down to San Diego, as far as over at Denver and up to Salt Lake City, that's where it was great. If we went to New York, we played to 400 people. When
Seriously.
something, yeah, maybe 500. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
Never cracked New York. Never cracked the East Coast.
So they were truly a regional band.
Yeah, except they had a number one record in Brazil and a number one record on top 10 record in Australia, and uh, and we actually got to play in Brazil. They brought us down there and then played to in Rio. They played to 37,000 people with no opening act. It was just
This
going.
this this explains something for me that I haven't been able to figure out at all. My number two market, other than United States, is Brazil.
Yeah, music lovers there by far.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I work with artists here now, and we do a lot of uh, you know uh, social media and that sort of thing, and we get feedback on where there is any impact. And very often, one of the leading countries that's paying attention to a particular artist is Brazil. It's a party. Well, I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but when we were there, it's just the party went on till 4 in the morning. It was a great feeling. Very professional. They weren't just crazy party goers. They just had a feel for life. It was
Mm.
wonderful to see and experience.
Well, I would love to dwell here for longer about Danny Elfman and Oingo Boingo. Of
I'll tell
course,
you, I'll finish up that story. I'll tell you why Danny, why what happened. He was offered, or we were asked to come into a meeting at Warner Brothers, and it was with Pee Wee Herman and I've forgotten the writer, but anyway, it was Tim Burton, his first movie, and in
that's
that,
Scissorhands wasn't his
yeah,
first movie,
sure,
but that guy.
yeah, Scissorhands, and a lot of great movies, but this was his first, and he was a Boingo fan, and Danny got offered the job on a Friday night. This was on Saturday. He
To
called me,
score the movie.
yeah. So for the Pee Wee's Big Adventure was the first one,
Ah,
and so he got the job on Friday night. They offered it to him. He called me on Saturday at home and said, "You got to get me out of this. I don't know how to score movies. I don't know how to do this." And I said, "Well, let me investigate. Give me at least till Monday. It's a weekend. I can't do much." And on Monday, we found out about a thing called the music editor in movies. That's common, but we didn't know that. We weren't in the music movie world.
is that the same thing as a music supervisor or different?
No, no, music editor. I don't know how
Is
it's
that more production?
it's I think it's more, I don't know, I don't want to diss anybody, but I think it's more technical and getting the music right, lining up with the movie and that sort of thing. But they had some power over what music was used. And then I also got Steve Bartek from Boingo to be Danny's orchestrator, and so there was a comfort zone there. So that's when Danny said, "Okay, I'll do it," and he wrote an absolutely brilliant score. I I invite anybody to go and take a look at Pee Wee's Big Adventure because the storyline and the humor and Pee Wee himself is great, but the music,
Was that Danny's first film then?
first movie, yeah,
Yeah.
he'd done a little movie with his brother, but this was his first step into the big time, you might say. And I got him his first four movies, and then but I wasn't an agent. We couldn't find an agent. No agent would pick up Danny Elfman, so we just did it ourselves until we found a guy who wasn't officially an agent at the time, but he knew what he was doing and became one of the biggest agents in the business. Um, so it's all
And
behind
that was who?
uh, Richard. Oh God, I'm having a bad day with names.
It doesn't matter. Let's move on.
He will not like that I don't remember that, but anyway. Um,
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Richard Kraft. I'm sorry, got it.
Okay.
And Richard started his own agency that was very big with strictly for composers, for film composers, and he was an expert on film music. He loved it.
So he knew all the supervisors.
Yeah, now the music supervisors, which I did on a few movies and TV shows, is you're sitting with the director and producers, and we want music here and certain kind of music there, and sometimes a particular song here, and it's up to the supervisor to go find the songs or make
And you would put out
put out what?
briefs, requests, briefs.
Yeah, you knew what you wanted, and well, the trick was not trick, but we knew a lot of people by then in the music industry. By then, I'd been vice president of A&M Records, not to mention Mercury Records, and I was then around then we were managing the Bangles, and they were a hot band and getting hotter every day. So the movie people thought, give the guy a shot, and we did great. We did a lot of good movies and TV shows. And that's what we did. We found like we got Stuart Copeland in, he scored some stuff. Um, you know,
By the way, is Mike Copeland any relation to Stuart Copeland?
you mean Miles Copeland?
Uh, the manager of the police, I
Yeah,
believe, was that Miles Copeland?
Miles Copeland.
So that's Stuart's dad.
Yeah, they were brothers.
Oh, brothers. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And the third brother started FBI agency and brought all those English bands in the 80s, and including the Police. It was a that was another kind of family situation that was great. Um, Miles Miles managed the Police and Squeeze, and he was a brilliant guy. He did a great job, and he was my partner in the management. He's the one who came to me to A&M and said, "You want to get out of here? I've got these bands. I got the band Oingo Boingo and Wall of Voodoo, and we hadn't yet seen the Bangles. And but he was so busy with the Police, they were really breaking wide. So he needed somebody else. So we made a deal and became partners. And I basically did for the rest of the 80s, basically did Boingo, Wall of Voodoo, and the Bangles. And later on, Concrete Blonde and a couple of other great bands. So yeah, that's the way that came together.
Fantastic. Um, I want a little behind the scenes stories from you. So Rod Stewart, Rush, BTO, the Police, Supertramp. Pick just three of these and give my subscribers an idea of what they were like to work with back then.
Well, Rod was a, a very, very smart guy. Um, Knew what he was doing, really good singer, knew music well, had the Faces together at that point with Ronnie Wood, who became a Rolling Stone. And but he was great. Away from the work, you could hang out, and we liked playing pool. He and I went to see The Godfather together in the early 70s. Um, it was good. We'd meet in Florida if he had some time, go see Smokey Robinson. I mean, it was just it was great stuff. And we also went looking in stores. I think I was with him when he found there was one track, um, I'd Rather Be Blind, I think it is.
Yeah.
And found that on a record in a store in Chicago. He was a great guy to work with, and as success came along, I mean, I started working with him. He was known in the music industry and to rock lovers, but he hadn't had Maggie May yet, which broke him right through the top. He wasn't a household name yet.
Right.
But he and the Faces were selling out some good venues and doing okay. He was really very cool. And sorry, you have a dog, I have a phone. That's what happened. Um,
You are perfectly welcome to answer it if you need to.
nah, it's all right. Just call back. So I know who it is. Um, anyway, it's where was I? Oh, it was Rod. I always liked him a great deal. I've heard he's going to stop touring, so I'm thinking I might go see him in Las Vegas. I haven't seen him for years, but always a good guy. Rush.
Did you have any run-ins with Jeff Beck because of Rod Stewart?
No, that was after Jeff Beck. I met Jeff Beck a couple of times, but it's not with Rod. Funny enough, I met Jeff Beck because of the Bangles. We were in Tokyo, and he was playing Budokan, and we were doing some promotion, and so we went to see him and met with him afterwards, and it was really great. It was really very nice. I mean, he was amazing. I'm not a guitarist. My background is drums, but I even knew there was something about Jeff Beck that nobody else had, some power to it, that the style, power, finesse, whatever it might be, it all came together so beautifully with him. And he was a nice, very nice guy when we met him.
Yeah, I think People Get Ready, which Rod and Jeff did together, really showed off both of their talents.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And, some people, Rod started out almost as a folk singer. I mean, if you listen to his first albums, there's folky kind of tunes in there that he'd dig up and sometimes write. And but then I guess when he got the Faces together, it was more rock oriented. And but good songwriter, real great ear for music and a great flair for life. I mean, he just had it was it was just wide open to him to have fun along with the hard work. Because he worked hard. He really did.
So he was a bit of a business guy as an artist, huh?
Yeah, business to some degree, but just understanding life in general. It was a,
Ah, okay.
I was with him at a hotel in Chicago, and this young guy came up to him, and the young guy was angry. He said, "I'm working night and day. I don't know what I'm trying to do this. He's just trying to survive and get a career going." He said, "And you're making all this money and everything," which Rod wasn't at the time. I mean, he made some, but he wasn't a rich guy yet. Um, and Rod listened to him and talked to him, and he just gave him an example. He said, just a few years ago, I was digging graves. That's what Rod did before it clicked. He was digging graves.
I
And
heard that.
he just said to the guy, just calm down. It'll work out if you put, if you get organized, and just don't put yourself down for it, and don't get mad at me or anybody else who makes it, because they worked hard to get where they are. And it really, the young guy, a real good lesson from that. And that was the first time I saw Rod get real serious. He knew what to do in that case. He was, yeah, bright guy.
So he imparted some life wisdom and dealt with the situation effortlessly, huh?
Yeah, he did. He did.
Um, for my sound guy, Daryl Shannon, tell me about Rush.
Well, Rush came to us in Mercury Records in Chicago, and via an A&R guy, and it was so different. I wouldn't. We believed in them, but we also wondered how we could get across to an audience that kind of music that was so different than what was going on. It still is, really. I mean, you can listen to it.
It's kind of progressive,
And
definitely.
and, um, and great musicians. Neil was a tremendous thing, and they were three great guys. But I remember I used to ride around in the van with them, which was fun. And uh, we were in Atlanta, I think it was, and at a hotel, and we wanted to go swimming. We didn't have any swimming trunks with us, so we went down in our underwear.
Mhm.
So picture those guys, and we're coming back up in the elevator, and we're kind of wet. And a lady gets on the elevator, and there's four of us standing there in our wet underwear. I don't remember if she said anything or not. I think she tried to ignore us. But yeah, there were times like that with those gentlemen and their manager. That was they really knew what they were doing. They had a great organization, and it stayed a
A good team around them.
yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
uh, so they were good guys, but they were serious musicians. And but it was new to them when I was with them. When they exploded really big, they were on another label, but we kept in touch. I went to see them a few times, and but uh, they deserved everything they got because they didn't just start writing pop songs because that would be easier. They were doing what they were doing, and whether it was a success or not, they were going to do it. When I was going to say, when I went with them once to a place in Illinois, I've forgotten the name of it, and they weren't getting on the radio. Radio wouldn't pay any attention to them at all. In fact, I was having difficulty getting the press or any media to pay attention to them because it was so different. And and it was on the radio. I don't know, went out there, but went out to one of these towns outside Chicago, and they played to about 1,000 people. And I thought, how did 1,000 people find out about these guys? And I guess there was an underground uh, communication system, maybe obviously before internet, and but the word got out, and it was a tremendous concert. But a lot of bands would have been at that stage playing to 50, 100. They'd be happy to have 200, and these guys somehow, I still don't know how the word got out, but you could see what was going to happen because it was them and their fans. They didn't care about they were happy, I think, when they finally got some radio play. And finally, the press got around to understanding they were worth talking to. But at that time, nothing was happening yet. Yet a lot of people knew about them and went to see them.
Yeah, my sound guy, as I've been saying, and his name is Daryl Shannon, is a huge Rush fan,
Mm.
and not just because they're Canadian, he's Canadian, but he really appreciates the musicianship that they have and had.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit about Sting. Any stories?
yeah. Well, yeah. The police came over to LA and they came to the A&M Records, which was on a lot. It was on a Charlie Chaplin lot. It wasn't a building with offices. It
Like
was,
like Capitol Records?
yeah, no, it was built literally by Charlie Chaplin, and the Charlie Chaplin soundstage was his backyard, and it was now our soundstage. And I walked out of my office, and my when you walked out of my office, you walked out to outside. You didn't go out into a hallway. And Sting was standing there. No, nobody knew who he was, but I'm telling you, the sun was like a spotlight on him. I mean, he just stood out, and he just it was like he wasn't with the other guys. He was looking around for something, and I went, "Oh my God, this guy! Not on top of all his great music,
He's got an aura.
yeah, exactly." And but they were also great guys. I didn't know Andy that well, but Stewart
And
is
that's
still a
Andy
friend.
Summers, of course.
Yeah, but Stewart and Sting. I don't talk to Sting too much anymore, but Stewart I see periodically, and it's good. But their music, man, that was another band that was not different, not like Rush. They weren't obviously that uh, out of the mainstream, but they had a touch to them and a feel to them. When I heard Roxanne, I just thought it's going to be a number one record. And it didn't become a number one record, but it got them introduced to a lot of radio people. And they just worked hard. They worked so hard. Um, and I remember talking with Sting once about how, when you're going to make it in this industry, when it starts, when you get over one little bump and you start taking off, you're feeling success coming at you. A lot of work to do still, but you're feeling it. You've got to all like 100% of your life has to go into it. Unfortunately, sometimes families get left behind. But then if you get over that 2.5 year period, and you reach a certain height, you can take it easy. You can say, no, I'm not going to tour for a month. You can control it a little more. But in the beginning stages, you're just hanging on to a tail end of just flying with along with it, whatever you were supposed to do. And I know artists who wouldn't do that, and they just didn't have that.
What was the alternative?
To me, there wasn't much of an alternative at the time. You had to deal with the media and tour, but they they were lucky in that they had a special, like you said, aura to them. Not just Sting, all three of them. Great concerts, uh, great songs. They did interesting things. I probably because of Miles, I think, but at an early stage when they didn't really have an international audience yet, they toured and played. They find play. They went to India. They were sponsored in India by some women's club who didn't know what they were getting in. They didn't know what it was about musically, but it was a you couldn't just go in and hire a hall or be hired by a promoter. So Miles somehow found a women's club that sponsored them and brought them into India. And then you see they were in Egypt. They'd be running around on horses, I think, not camels, around the pyramids. It was amazing to see. And Miles would come in my office. He'd come back from tour and he'd come back with those days, the film rolls, it wasn't as easy as it is now. And he'd come in with a box full of film roll, dumping on my desk. And I would have them developed, which saved him a lot of money. I would just get them, because we could use the photos too. Um, and we had a nice working relationship. And when he started IRS Records, and IRS was REM and the Go-Go's and some great artists. Um, it was like the little brother to A&M Records until it really took off. And I loved going over to those offices because, again, it was a different approach to things. The people who were working there, Jay Boberg ran it, and because Miles was, again, running around the world, but they really went after some great artists, very different artists, and made that label into something powerful. So REM and the Go-Go's alone would, and Fine Young Cannibals, which was a tremendous band from England. Uh,
Hmm.
they found some great talent and they worked it. And Oingo Boingo originally was on IRS, and there was a deal with the A&M that if an artist on IRS got to 50,000 sales, A&M could take them over and take their career over. And they did that with Oingo Boingo. It was selling like crazy in LA mainly, but they ended up on A&M, but they were on IRS to start with. So it was a real tribute to Miles and
Were
Jay.
you ever with IRS? No.
No, no, no. I was
You
with
went from
okay.
Mercury to AMM to Polygram back to AMM, A&M, was it?
What with what? Sorry,
You were with Mercury
I was in Mercury and then A
and
and M.
then A&M and then Polygram for a short
No,
stint.
Polygram was Mercury was owned by Polygram. Polygram decided it was going to what would the word be, kind of consolidate in America or North America and use the name Polygram. But under that was Mercury Records and I forgot what other labels right away. But then they wanted me to do corporate PR, which basically I did for the last year of my time at Mercury, was introducing Polygram to the world through media and so on. So I did that as part of Mercury. Then I went to A&M. And then after A&M, I went to, well, Miles and I formed a management company, which was known as LAPD.
LAPD.
Yeah. And,
Stop, LAPD.
well, his agent, his brother, who was the agent, had FBI.
Miles
No,
Copeland.
his brother had Miles's brother, the third brother. There was, Stuart and Miles, and they that was FBI agency. So it was LAPD, FBI, IRS records, and it was all sort of under the umbrella of the police. It was
The three letter companies.
Yeah, well, LAPD stood for LA Personal Development. IRS, I've forgotten. FBI was Frontier Booking. We didn't run into any trouble using those names except for the FBI called up Ian, who's the third brother, and he had put a logo together for FBI. It was very close to the FBI logo. So they called them up and said, you can keep the name, but change your logo. And that was it. But I never heard from the LAPD and I never heard from, or Miles, and certainly IRS never calls. There was no problem with that. But it was all under that one umbrella. It was fun, we're having fun with it. It was a lot of work, but, you know, let's be silly every once in a while. It feels good.
Mike, I've got two questions that I have to get to, and we're doing good on time.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm going to jump ahead a bit. Uh, do you think the advent of internet and Napster in particular, and then the eventuality of Spotify hastened some of your career changes from labels to LAPD?
No, it didn't do that. They did other things, which we can talk about, but it didn't affect us that much. What was really we had really focused on when the internet was not that powerful yet. We've really focused on MTV because you get a video on MTV, it was like a massive radio station. You got such exposure. So it was still radio, and at that point then MTV, and MTV was very good.
And touring.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah, and touring, and so that's what we looked at. But uh, it was what was the internet itself. You could see it starting, and you could see it starting to pick up. and Napster. Well, I remember being at a meeting in San Diego about the internet before, when it was still a baby, and the fellow on stage was saying, "Well, I don't have to sign with a label, and I'm not going to I'm not even going to worry about radio and all that stuff." And it was very, very contradicted everything that you had to do in those days to make it. I said, "How are you going to make any money?" He said, "We'll sell T-shirts." I said, "How are you going to sell T-shirts if nobody knows who you are?" But they did it. So many bands came along and just did it themselves, and that we glommed onto because Miles had a label, um, a smaller label than IRS. The Bangles had, I think it's called Down Kitty label, their own label, before we ever met them. A lot of people were starting to do that because of that atmosphere of individuality and not having to sign, heavy contracts with big companies. It was still kind of the goal, but musically speaking, people
So
wanted
are we talking 90s or are we in the 2000s already?
80s and
Oh, 80s. Okay.
yeah. Um, Still all the punk movement was coming along, and then new wave, all those labels were. It was very exciting, very interesting music, and some people didn't understand the whole punk thing. They thought it was violent and nasty and mean and so on. I don't know, maybe it was, but it was aggression. It was a kind of music they wanted to.
And you had experience with the New York Dolls.
Yeah, prior to that, I helped get the New York Dolls signed to Mercury Records. Not that I was an A&R guy, and not that I was responsible for them in that sense, but I was asked to go see them in New York by the guy who was trying to sign them to Mercury Records. And he said, "When you come into New York, just please come and see them." Well, I went to see them, and they knocked me out. They were incredible. Not incredible musicians, but in just incredible power. And of course, they looked great in what they were wearing. It was like street theater, really. So I went back to Chicago to head office, and I wrote a note to the president of the company. I said, "You got to sign these guys, and here's why." I guess he called the A&R guy and said, "Do it." So he signed them. And when you think about what came along after the New York Dolls, in England and New York particularly, and that whole, what we were just talking about, punks and new wave and so on, they were a part of the foundation of that. It's interesting. I sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the Dolls hadn't come along. Probably somebody would have, but
No, no Sid Vicious, right?
no. Well, no, yeah, no. I don't think the Sex Pistols would have got what they got if the Dolls hadn't paved the way to some degree.
Pioneered the movement.
Yeah, yeah. So it's an amazingly exciting time though, and pretty freewheeling while still having the goal in mind. And of course, everybody had their different goals, but a lot of those so-called punk bands ended up pretty big, and even the Bangles, which was not a punk band, but they were in LA during that time. They were friends of all these other bands, so there was a feeling, an understanding that they had that was pretty cool too.
All right. Um, so Napster didn't do it to you. Um, uh,
I tell you what I was thinking regarding Napster and the internet. I was thinking, wow, this is an avenue for a musician, for an artist. They don't have to depend on radio anymore and all the stuff that was normal at the time. And you can release your own stuff, and a lot of good music can come out. And that happened for a while, but then it became just overrun with, especially when studios in your basement were possible. A lot of people just didn't have the kind of talent, but they were putting out records, and that was fine. But the internet didn't open up like I thought it would. It did to some degree, but it's also kind of shut down a lot of things. 'Cause it's so big. You gotta scream so much louder than the next guy to get noticed. So it just makes things a little more difficult now.
I've heard a stat recently that Spotify literally gets something like 1 million songs submitted a day.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a day or a week or probably, but how can you pay attention to all of that?
You're a little black dot in a sea of black.
Yeah, yeah. And musicians who had not yet honed their craft had needed to learn to write songs more than they were doing, and some of uh it was the heck with writing songs and knowing how this is what I want to say, and that was cool. But uh, they didn't get a chance to kind of grow. They they were not heard.
All right. I'm going to fast forward. You did something in your career that I think's admirable and very interesting. In 2008, you established for UCLA Extension
Mm.
continuing education program, a course called The Insider's Guide to Music Management. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I heard from somebody at UCLA they were looking for ideas for class, whatever it might be, and I think I know a guy who had a class there, a music class of a marketing class, and he actually asked me to speak there a couple of times, and so I found it very interesting. So I went to the people who put these things together and approved any kind of class, and they liked it, and so we started. And we started the class on Wednesday night, and with all night classes. Um, but by the time we were done, it the class was, those classes at UCLA looked like they hold 100 people. I may have had 20 people, and it looked kind of small, but eventually it was filling up, filling up, and
I
it
would
was
imagine your class would have been sold out.
well, not in the beginning because people had to find out about it. I
Hmm.
think it's still going. I only did it for maybe a year because I was so busy with my company. And, the first night that I was in front of that class, and I wasn't a great student, the first night I was in front of that class, I started, when it was over, I thought, I need to call some of my teachers and professors from the past and apologize because I didn't know what you were going through. Uh,
Hmm.
I think it was a 2 hour class, 2.5 hours, and I had it planned out. And with my plan, we were done in like 20 minutes. I had the rest of the night to try to figure out what to do. Fortunately, I had a guest come in the second half, um, and I realized I you glom on somebody, one particular student, you can find the ones that want to talk, and you
Yep.
hit them with questions, and you get a conversation going, you get maybe a debate going. But I didn't know that first night. It was pretty scary. Um, that's just me, of course. But anyway, it worked out quite well, and we had a one particular class on that about social media, which was a new phrase at that time, and brought in a couple of experts who knew what they were doing and talking about it, and it was very interesting. But we had everything from, I think just a student wanted to know what it was all about to vice president of Disney was in my class. I'm not sure why, because he was very successful, but he the only class he missed was when he had to give Miley Cyrus a gold record. So, uh, but that was very interesting class to do, and it was educational for me. But what you have to prepare, how you prepare to teach a class, and I was just doing one night a week. When they came to me, they wanted to expand it, maybe 3 nights a week, and so I just said I can barely do the one night a week. So they found somebody else who took over the class. I think it's still going, and it's got the same name. Um, and I'm glad I got that going.
Well, fantastic, and thanks you for all your students. We're going to have to move ahead to my final two questions because we are running out of time, and you have been a fabulous guest. And again, for me and my subscribers, I want to tell you how grateful we are for your time. Uh, let's talk about your take on the current music environment and what it means for most artists trying to get a foothold in the industry today.
Hmm. Everybody knows how difficult it is now. The record companies, if they exist anymore, are really concentrating on hip hop and because it's selling. They're working on what sells. So if you look at I don't know a chart of hits, let's say the top 20, you might find one guitar band in there, whereas in the past it was almost all guitar bands. So it's shifted dramatically. And if you're not in that vein of music, you're down to touring, which is very expensive these days, and and doing your own, and then maybe getting signed. And of course, people can become successful, but and the internet, I think, is despite the fact it's pretty crowded, you can come through and get to people all over the world that way. And there's the internet radio and shows like your show. And I have a show. I have a podcast. I mean, it's fun to get the word out there that it's a calls for a real hustle these days and real hard work. And there's you hear things about home concerts where more in the softer, maybe folkier kind of lane, but um, you can tour America from people's homes to people's homes. You don't play a venue, and maybe you build up to a venue. I think that's great.
That is
Um,
something. I didn't even know that existed. Um,
yeah, it's a
Talk
house
about
concert.
underground, you know.
No, this house concerts. They're still going on, and they're a lot of really good artists are doing that. And sometimes they'll play on a Friday night to a couple of thousand people, and on Saturday they'll play to 35 people at the house concert just because they like to. You had the night off anyway, maybe something like that. And there are some people out there who've devoted their homes. I have some friends out in outside LA who have their living room has a stage.
Ask my wife about that.
Yeah, has a stage, has lighting. They bring out.
Yeah, we got all that.
Yeah.
Smoke, you name it, we got it.
So I love that home. And boy, is it nice to go to those, because usually sometimes there's food and and just sit back and enjoy some great music in the comfort of somebody's living room. I think it's very cool.
And you usually meet great people that way too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think if you're in the same neighborhood and they have concerts every Saturday or once a month or whatever it might be, a lot of the same people are coming together and it's like becoming a club kind of, and you get to know your neighbors quite nicely, which is not easy to do these days. So and they're all music fans. They wouldn't be there if they weren't happy about what was being played. So that's really interesting. It's really the major labels. Um, they're not the same. I don't like, uh, for example, Spotify you mentioned earlier. I don't like the kind of money they're making because songwriters are not. Somehow you get on Spotify and you get exposure, um, and if you're on a label, the money goes to the label. And I heard that they made a deal that the label would be responsible for paying their artists. They aren't. Or not like they used to. You get a lot of artists that are just songwriters, particularly who I have several friends who make a living off having one or two hits that they wrote, and now it's difficult to make a living on that way. Which the home concert actually helps. A lot of those songwriters are guitar players and singers, and they have their own songs, and that's the place. That's an outlet. You can sell some music that night and keep on going. But yeah, so that's what's going on there.
All right. So to wrap up our very, very cool discussion, if you had a daughter or son, and I don't know if you do or not, what advice would you give them if they had aspirations as a music artist in today's industry?
Well, my son graduated from Berklee College of Music,
Ah,
and then came back to LA, and I said, And how old is he at that point? 23, something like that. And I said, if you're going to do this, you got to get going. You got to get out on the road, because what's going to happen is you're going to meet somebody, want to get married, and then that's it. Well, that's what happened. He's in marketing now, and he's a really fine drummer, and he's getting back into it these days. But he didn't go on the road like a lot of others might do. And so he's one. My daughter is not musically inclined. She's very creative in the business world. So what advice would I give them if it was brand new? That's what advice I gave my son was get on the road, get out and play. And he, after a while, chose not to. But that's what you had to do, even no matter how educated you are, and maybe you're connected, and you hear about musicians who are still in school and they're going well. It's tough to balance that kind of life, but but that was my advice then, and he didn't follow it, and he's in marketing now, but that's not I don't put as a put down. He also co-owns a pub in Koreatown, so he's having fun. He's an expert in beer, and just very different kinds of beer from all over the world. So it's fun. It's fun, and my daughter's had a great success she's in the film world in making trailers, and then now she's a coach to executives. It's they take their brains and go with them after a while.
They didn't fall far from the tree though with their inventiveness and industriousness.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so
they work hard, both of them. And
I
my son, my daughter, or anybody else's, you got to know what they want to do. You may not agree with it, but you got to let people expand a little bit, not hold them down too much. You want to control them. You're still the father or the mother, and you're still responsible for them up to a certain age. But you got to give them some room to breathe, and that's a bit of a trick, but that's what I think you'd have to do.
All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as me.
Yeah, great,
Uh,
great
I,
show you have.
I found it absolutely fascinating, as will my subscribers. And we burned up an hour.
Mhm.
And I think we've only really touched the surface. So hopefully I can have you back again at some point.
Yeah, I'd love that.
And I would like to mention that I was on your podcast last week for the premiere of my new album,
Mhm.
uh, Mass Facade, which is a concept album. And today I went on Spotify just to take a look-see. And when I sorted by saves, every one of my Mass Facade songs came up to the top of the list
Oh, wow, nice.
in 4 days out. So
Yeah,
I was just shocked.
that's
Um,
but that's what we're talking about, right? That's the independent way of getting it done now. What's the next step?
Mike, I'll talk to you about that after the show.
Okay.
All
Well,
right, man.
I have your folks come over. It's called the Mike Gormley Show. It's really easy. I didn't
Yeah,
I didn't put a fancy name on it. Just slapped it on there.
yeah,
I've had
it's
some
it's
great people
it's
on.
it's right here.
There you go.
Okay, Mike. Thank you so much,
It's
and
great to spend time with you.
I'm sure we will talk again.
Okay, sir. Thanks so
All
much.
right.
Bye,
Bye bye.
everybody. Bye bye.